Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you here tonight and talk about one of our favorite subjects. While we're waiting for everyone to gather, we've got a little poll here so we can learn just a little bit more about you. So if you're willing to fill that out, we'd certainly appreciate it. And we will get started in about 1 or 2 minutes once everybody is able to get in the room. But we're looking forward to talking to you tonight. Welcome everyone who's entering. We're having more people coming on in. So welcome, and we will get started in about 1 minute. We do have a poll up, which is just helpful for us to see who's joining us tonight and kind of what area you're coming from. So if you would fill that out, we will get started in about 1 minute. Okay, welcome everybody. We are still coming in. Fantastic. If you just entered, welcome. We're so glad you're here. And we do have a little poll up just to know who you are that's joining us tonight. And we are going to get started in just a second. So let's get going on talking about UT. All right. So tonight we are going to talk about inside the class of 2026 UT admissions. This is one of our favorite subjects. Our team has been doing webinars on UT for many years, and it's something that's near and dear to our hearts. And hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of questions. We have a stellar group to talk to you tonight, and I'm just so pleased to share them with you guys. We have so much experience. Allison Randall, Molly Gully, and Camille Nix together, they have years and years of experience working with UT, and so they are going to guide our conversation tonight, and you are in for a treat. One of the things that we do is we do have a whole series of webinars, and you'll see them here. And we've got a little poll here. Some people have asked, can I just have a pass to all of them? Can I just register for all of them at once? You can, and that's up on the screen right now. And you'll see we sort of just cover on a timeline, the topics as they are timely. So we'll be doing one on AP. We'll be doing one on how to get your junior year started. In May, we'll be doing one on kind of looking at the whole season, not just UT that just let out their results, but all of college admissions results. So if you are someone who frequents our webinars and you just want to make it easy, you can go ahead and sign up for all of those, and then you'll be registered and ready to go with those. We love these times when you guys join us and we get to share this knowledge. So feel free to fill that out, and we will kick off on talking about UT. All right. So, why does this even matter? Why did you guys join us tonight? One of the things we want to do is share our knowledge. We have a really great benefit if we work with quite a few kids, and about 2/3 to 3/4 apply to UT. So we see a lot of students every year. So we can share with you our insights on this really competitive process. And as we all know, whether you go to the grocery store or you're at a PTA meeting or wherever you are, there's lots of rumors about what it takes to get into UT. And what we want to do is hopefully lower the temperature by sharing with you the information that we've seen that's been successful with students we've actually coached. So with real world cases. And we hope that by sharing this information with you, it gives you some agency and hopefully reduces your family's stress, because one of our overall goals for college counseling is to reduce family stress. And knowledge is power. So by understanding how this process works, we hope that that will lower the temperature just a little bit on what we know is a very stressful process. A couple of just little housekeeping things. If you have questions, would you please put them in the Q&A box? That's helpful to us so that we won't get to all the questions because we have a pretty full webinar, and we won't answer really super student specific questions. So we're not able to do that tonight. You will tomorrow receive a email with our slides and a recording. So if you're cooking dinner or doing something else, don't worry, you don't need to stop and take notes. We will send that to you tomorrow. And if you're interested in talking to someone on our team about how you can work with us, we do offer that one-on-one meeting as well. So with all of the housekeeping in mind, I am going to hand it over to Molly, and she's going to talk about how UT evaluates applications.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Sure.
How does UT evaluate applications? First I want to start off with kind of unboxing a common misconception that we see every year is that UT admissions is primarily about class rank. Now, yes, being in the top 5% does guarantee admission to UT Austin, but I want to remind everyone that being in the top 10% only guarantees students admission to liberal arts majors, and only specific liberal arts majors. You can't even get automatic admission into economics or psychology. So while things like class rank, GPA, and test scores, they definitely all matter, they're just the starting point for how UT Austin evaluates applications. What's really happening behind the scenes is a lot more nuanced. UT is evaluating students through a very specific lens. And I'll just be transparent. That lens is, has this student provided evidence that they will succeed in their chosen major? If you kind of use that as your North Star when you're thinking about applying to UT Austin, does it always come back to that kind of proof of evidence that you're going to succeed in that first choice major? That is a really good starting point. But before we talk about the how of admissions, I wanted to level set and just talk about the absolute dramatic transformation that UT Austin has experienced since I saw there was a lot of parents on this call. In the 20 years since a lot of the parents on this call, went to college, UT Austin has just completely changed. It has gone from, UT Austin has always been a highly respected public flagship university, but it has now become one of the most competitive admissions environments in the country. The first way we can see this is just the change in numbers. So just to put it in perspective, 20 years ago, UT Austin received about 20,000 applications. By 2021, that number had grown to 50,000. And this year, UT Austin received over 100,000 applications. So that is just an extraordinary level of application inflation. And it has fundamentally transformed how selective UT Austin has become. But we get the question a lot, like, why? What drove this growth? How did you go from 20 years ago having 20,000 applications to now having over 100,000? Well, this is all about the state of Texas making major investments in research and academic excellence of its higher education flagship institutions. As a result, a lot of UT departments have risen into the top 10% nationally, and that has just increased the university's prestige and demand. We are seeing the spotlight not just from across the nation, but globally. UT Austin has become a respected university, which again just drives demand for the university, and that's where we see that growth. Just again, to put it in perspective, programs like the Macomb School of Business, Cockrell School of Engineering, and highly sought after majors like computer science, they're now competitively positioned alongside some of the most selective institutions in the country. So you can see on par with Carnegie Mellon, Caltech. This shift helps explain kind of one of the common questions that family asks us. Why did a highly qualified, academically qualified student not get offered admission? And the answer is usually not that the student was not strong. It is that they weren't positioned for the level of selectivity and alignment that UT Austin now requires. All right, so let's now get into that how. All right, so let's kind of see exactly how UT Austin is evaluating applicants. It really comes down to two core profiles. And the profiles work together in order to build strength. This is the academic profile and the personal profile. If you look at the image on the slide, you'll see those two profiles represented as two axes. On the x-axis, we have the academic profile, or the academic strength of the applicant. This part of the review is really built from concrete numerical inputs, things like GPA and test scores. This score is very quantitative and gives the admission readers a clear picture of the student's academic readiness. On the y-axis is really where we see UT Austin's holistic review really come to life. We see what they're talking about when we talk about fit to major. Every application is read by a trained admissions reader using a detailed rubric. They carefully evaluate the personal statement, the major and activity essay, and the expanded resume. They read through all of this and they're asking one central question. Will this student succeed in their first choice major? And success in a major is not demonstrated by interest alone. It's demonstrated by growth and progression. So readers are looking for intentional progression from that initial curiosity to active involvement to then taking initiative and ultimately making an impact. Most importantly, all of these steps are viewed through the lens of the student's first choice major. So you always need to remember that it always comes back to that first choice major. So when we think about UT's evaluation process, it's not simply how academically strong. That is one access point, but it's really about how that academic profile and their personal story come together to show a clear fit to major, a strong likelihood of success in that specific major that they're applying to. So we see it's that intersection right up there in that right-hand corner where where the academic strength and the depth of engagement come together. Okay, so what did this look like for this year? One of the biggest takeaways this year, and it hasn't changed, is that the first choice major continues to be the foundation of the entire application. Readers evaluate the GPA, the coursework, the test scores, the essays, the activities, all through that, again, that specific lens. Does this profile demonstrate readiness for a particular field? For example, a student applying to engineering will be evaluated very differently than a student who chose communication or government as their first choice major. It would look completely different. They would be looking for different things because those are different fields that require different aptitudes and strengths. Admissions officers, they're really looking for evidence of preparation, not just interest, but demonstrated commitment and progression over time. I've oftentimes used the phrase that this is considered the through line. They're looking for a student's trajectory. So there needs to be a clear story. The student needs to demonstrate that through line with the classes they take, the activities they pursue, the projects they initiate, and even the goals that they describe in their essays. When that through line, when that trajectory is strong, admissions readers can quickly see a student's potential. When it's weak or inconsistent, and even a very accomplished student can appear unfocused. So one of the most important strategic decisions that students have to make when they're applying to UT is choosing that first choice major that truly reflects the student's preparations and interests. Lisa, I'll turn that back over to you.
Fantastic. So, okay, what are the 2026 outcomes that were actually revealed? Allison, you've been working with UT kiddos for a long time. Will you take it and tell us what you saw?
Absolutely. So, as Molly mentioned, lots of applications was one of the first results. Lots of applications, which of course means that the level of scrutiny, the level of just what those readers are looking for. And what the students that I've been meeting with in the since decisions went out, it's really about not that they weren't, it's not about that they weren't qualified applicants, they were, right? And it's really looking for that alignment, right? Between the courses that they took, between then the activities that they explored, the initiative they took, and ultimately the impact that they made. And so a huge number of the applicants from this year's pool were clustered in that Q2 and Q3 section of that Molly showed us, right? Strong academic profile, interest and involvement, maybe a little bit of initiative, right? But the admits, the students that were selected and were fully admitted to UT Austin were in that little orange target that we see on the screen, where they not only had the academic preparation, they had the classes aligned with their intended major. Test scores, not just that composite test score, but the subject scores within that test score that really showed, again, their ability to succeed in that first choice major. So for example, an engineering student that has a high math score, right? An English student that has a really high reading and English score, right? These things. And then ultimately that initiative and impact. So this was not, what I really could see this year was the resumes of the accepted students weren't, I did this, I did this, I did this. They were, I wondered this, I explored this, I discovered this, and then I did that, right? And so the story you could see a really, like Molly says, intentional progression. And in a student resume and in a student story, we see that intent through reflection. And so it wasn't that we had to see it. They could tell it. They could say, well, actually, this particular activity didn't go like I thought, but I discovered this. So let me give an example. There was an example of this is there was a student interested in business as a freshman. So doubled up in math, right? Decided to dive in, took an online business class, but was also really, really involved in a bunch of other stuff at school, right? Was involved with played 2 sports and also was in Model UN, just someone that was really, really, just had a lot of interests, right? Really like to be with people. And so she took the online finance class and then was like, wait a second, I've got a couple of skills I know how to use now. You know what? I'm gonna use those in my sports team. So one of her teams was actually really having trouble covering a particular coach that they want to bring in and train them. And so she used what she learned to help the team fundraise, right? They actually created this equipment that they branded that they could sell, right? And she handled all the finance, all the money, right? So that they got to have this coach come in and train them. And then she's continuing the math, right? She's continuing to take math. And then she starts tutoring math and then goes down to the middle school to help those students know what classes they should take when they get to high school if they want to follow the path she followed. And that's the kind of thing, right? No one asked her to do that. She thought, wow, you know what would have helped me? I really wish that I would have known this when I was a freshman or when I was a sophomore. And so she did it, right? And she went and made it happen. And so really, these are profiles of students that not only are curious, but they're curious and then they take action and then they reflect. And so it's this whole cycle of, it isn't just over when you have done the thing, right? That just actually opens up more questions, which leads you to more action. And then they can tell that story in their essay. And that story, you can see the why underneath, even in their resume. Anything to add, Molly, Camille, about the profiles that we saw this year that were successful?
No, I just love what you said about that story. It needs to have, kind of what we talk about when you're, reading a novel, a story arc. You need to, how a student entered, how they made that discovery, they increased their interest, they took initiative, and then they can show that impact. You can kind of think of it as storytelling. And those are the most successful applications.
Okay. So I've got a few more examples here of students who, again, are showing that cycle of curiosity, action, reflection, initiative, right? And so this student, not many people are just fall in love with government as a subject, right? But this student did, right? Took a government class in the summer just as like a Coursera class, just to see, right? And actually said, I wish I could do this all day long. Now, not everybody's that lucky. Not everyone discovers their first love of government, right? And so that was a little bit lucky, right? But then really went after it, just showed up at all the student government meetings, right? Ran for an office, did not get it, did not get the office. Someone else got selected. But actually took the time that they had because they didn't get selected as an officer to figure out why more students weren't getting involved, and literally just started going and talking to people. Like, why don't you get in? Why don't you come to the student government meetings? Why don't you help with XYZ? And actually realized that what they had was a communication problem, and that people just really weren't getting the information in a timely manner. And so then she took, again, this is just completely on her own, right? She actually went to the student government meeting and shared, hey, I've been talking to people, and if we can post the things that, like the volunteer opportunities that there are, a month ahead instead of a week ahead, we could get more people involved. Great. So that's moving, right? She runs again for a student office, does not get it, right? And can tell a whole story about what that experience was for her and why that didn't stop her from being involved, right? She was like, well, that's one way to be involved. I guess that's not going to happen for me. I'm going to keep being involved this way. So she found, through a family friend, happened to be able to spend some time with a local judge, right? Doing something really boring, by the way. It was like filing stuff, right? But then realized they were so close to the Capitol that she found a way to just go start observing the legislature in session. Just figured out how to be a gallery visitor when there were things that they wanted, that she was interested in having people discuss, and then came back after that and presented to the student government about what she had learned over the summer just hanging out at the legislature, and again made some suggestions for how they might change things to get more substantive discussion over the topics they were talking about. So this is just a student who is just doing their thing, and kind of didn't have immediate success, right? Definitely never ever got selected for a student office, but stuck with it, stayed, figured out a way to get involved. And really, the student that I worked with was disappointed, obviously, when this happened, right? It was like, oh, and I was like, and when the end, when we were kind of working on an application, I was like, you know what? I wonder if that would have been as interesting a story. She helped a friend run because she was like, well, I don't know how to do it, but like, let me tell you what I learned, right? So this was a person that really was making an impact and just super curious, and just kept doing and kept figuring out ways to share what they were learning and make things better, right? And so again, a unique story, but I feel like really demonstrates it doesn't have to be every title. It doesn't have to be every office, every formal title was the captain of this, the captain of that. This was a student that just kept showing up. Like, that's what she did. She kept showing up and talking to people and then sharing what she learned, right? And so, and then, I would say there was a student that had a little bit more of a traditional path, definitely knew early on that they were possibly interested in science and medicine. So went after that high school coursework that aligned with that interest, right? Their school happened to offer a program that had a practicum where you could do a clinical rotation. They made sure they were on track for that. They did a medical summer program, which was fine. But ultimately, there was something that they discovered in that summer program that they had a question about. And that was, what happens to all the medical debt? Like, what happens to all the unpaid debt at hospitals? This student just got really, really curious. Like, what happened? Do people go to jail? Like, what happens? And just started and did that as an independent research project in his history class. Got the teacher to agree to let him explore this in his history class, so that he could watch the development of this over time. And then ultimately started doing some fundraising with organizations that help people pay off medical debt. Again, this is just one of those, discovered it, did it, it took him here, that took him there. Ultimately, he actually ended up doing an internship at a law firm that represented people who were trying to get out from under medical debt, right? And so you could see that little seed. It wasn't the genetics internship. It wasn't, he literally followed that thread. And what was absolutely evident was, when this person is curious about something, you better look out, right? Because they're going to follow it all the way home. And again, who doesn't want that in a scientist, right? And then we have a business major, again, started out in a pretty traditional fashion, exploring, did an online investment program because they needed to work and to help take care of family in the summer. And so couldn't go away to a pre-college program, couldn't spend that kind of money, but found a way to do like a simulated investment program online. But also at the same time was driving a really long distance to and from basketball practice. This is a person that lived out kind of in the middle of nowhere and had a long way to drive to basketball practice. And as he was driving to and from basketball practice all summer, he started wondering, like, what is happening with all the undeveloped land that he was driving through, that there were all these for sale signs of like, this is for sale. And of course, the next week it'd still be for sale. And the next week it'd still be for sale. He happened to love drones. And so he decided, again, just kind of like gave it a shot, decided to take a video of one of these pieces of property with a drone, and then offered to sell that video to the real estate company that was marketing the property, to say like, hey, I'll sell you this video of your property in case it helps you sell it, right? Turns out that was a really good idea. And the real estate company said, what other videos do you have? Just doing this alongside. He had a job, right? He was taking, math and all of the right coursework. And then ultimately got involved with fundraising, using a kind of almost sharing what he had learned about his drone photography kind of business model with a student organization that wanted to raise money. And they ended up using drone photography of a school event, and then kind of selling that to raise money. And so again, tons of creativity and really just little ideas that don't stay ideas, right? That they get to the next level and then they get to the next step. And these students didn't know where it was going to end up. They didn't decide. When he was ninth grade, he didn't say, I'm going to start a drone photography business when I'm in 10th grade. He was just really bored driving to basketball practice, right? And so you can see, I think, that through line of just curious, creative people taking little steps, showing up, contributing their gifts and talents, right? He happened to like to use drones. Okay. And that is really why we say it's just so organic, student by student. It isn't Google Maps. We can't say you must do one summer program and stir, right? It's all about the student really leading and being curious and then contributing what they are most happy to contribute. Anything to add, y'all?
Allison, there's a word that comes to mind as you describe that, which is also persistence. Like there's this combination that you're describing of curiosity and persistence. That's so
Exactly right.
fascinating because I think that, Molly, your through line,
Yep.
like it's that, can you stay with it and keep being curious? And I think that's a really that's a special combination, and kids learn a lot. I mean, think of all the things you just described that student learned about themselves, which is really cool.
And I
Um,
also just wanted to emphasize, Allison, you were talking so much about creativity, curiosity, but these were also just, like you said, they were self-initiated. They
mm,
weren't
Yes.
prescribed activities. There wasn't, somebody telling them that this is what you should do. It was just allowing the student to generate ideas and giving them the space to explore where those ideas are going to go. And that is so important. That is a quality that colleges, all universities value, that ability to ask, I wonder where this would go.
mhm,
And so that the self-initiated is so important.
mhm.
These weren't big things. These were little bitty one drone video to one real. He didn't start a global company, right? It
Right.
was just one video with a drone that he already liked to use because it was fun. And then he thought, I'm just going to give that a shot, right? And so I always tell students impact can be one person, one video,
But this
one, right?
also would have turned out as a great experience if that realtor had said, no thanks. I'm good. Like it still would have been an impactful exercise for him to go through. So it doesn't need to be a success or a failure.
Right. Camille, you want to talk a little bit about what we saw in terms of the academic signals that we feel like helped students?
Need to do that. Um, in the academic world, I think one of the things about college admissions that is tough is that your kid can do all the right things and it not be enough, or it feels like you're slighted if you don't get in some place where you think you deserve to do so. And this, to me, is the one place that students really can control the narrative. And so I think that, again, it sort of points back to what Molly was talking about at the very beginning of the webinar, where that idea of the first choice major as the foundation of a four-year plan is critical. So when you're thinking about your child's journey through high school, you do have to plan and prepare each year with the lens of what your students' interests are. And whether your student knows exactly what they want to be when they grow up, because most don't, they know an area of interest. And carving a pathway in that way that is both purposeful and capitalizes on what each high school offers is an element that is the key. And when admissions look at students, they're not comparing high school B student to high school X student. They're looking at a school's school profile and what they offer. And did this student capitalize on what was offered in the area they wanted to study? So, for example, if you have a business student, did that student take calculus? Did that student take AP economics? Did that student take the business classes at the high school that are offered there? And if not, did they do something outside of the high school, whether it's a community college course or an impact scenario that shows that deep interest in business? Same goes for engineering. Did the student take calculus, physics, 1 and 2, let's say? If the school's offering engineering or robotics, did the student capitalize by being part of those courses? In the STEM world, the state requires 4 sciences, but did the student step up and say, hey, I'm going to double up on science junior year so that I can take AP chemistry? And that way I've got 5 sciences, not 4 sciences. I think also, if you're looking at like a journalism student, for example, what did the student take AP English? Did the student take the journalism courses offered at the high school? And then the last piece of that is taking a look at standardized testing. UT does read closest in alignment to what the major is. So, for example, Cockrell and McCombs, they're going to look most closely at math. They don't release in their common data set their quartile, but we do know from our case studies and our students that we help and throughout the years that a competitive student will typically have like starting at about a 700 in the math on the SAT. And after that, admitted is typically somewhere around 740 plus. So I do think it's important to create the backbone. To me, this high school plan is the backbone of a student's entire story. So all of the other things that feel extra and, like pay to play references and all of those different kinds of things that do show impact, summer programming, internships, that sort of thing. This is the one nugget that you can completely manage yourself and ensure that you empower yourself to maximize on what your high school offers and how that tells your story. Does anyone have any thoughts about that? I do think about one kid, for example, that I helped who kind of had a later start in high school. So a little bit of a bumpy freshman year, but an excellent student sophomore, junior, and senior year. And I love these kind of stories because UT does admit outside of the top 5%. They do, I promise. And what this student did is he really stepped up and embraced the high school foundation. So took all of the engineering courses that were offered. This particular high school maxes out at Calculus BC. That's where he finished. Took AP Physics 1 plus C, and really drove home what he could control to show his upward trajectory. Like, yes, I had this bumpy freshman year, but since then, look what I've done. I've engaged in everything this high school offers. He was a two-sport athlete. He ended up with a 750 on the math side of his SAT. He made that studying for the SAT like a part-time job, where he just, sunk his heels in and did it. And he's there. He's there now. So that's one of my favorite success stories because it didn't start beautifully. And I like to leave you with that, with course planning, because to me, if it's not always perfect, kids are human beings and we do make mistakes along the way. There are classes that are harder for us to handle than others, and those bumps are okay. But again, that foundation is everything.
Molly or Allison, you have anything to add on the academic side?
I mean, we always tell students, we spend all this time talking about resume and activities, but grades are twice as important as test score. Grades are twice as important. We always say like that has to be the foundation, right? And because no matter how beautiful that test score is, or no matter how many, drone videos you make, if you can't succeed in rigorous coursework, ultimately, like Molly said, you've got to demonstrate that you can succeed in that first choice major on the first day, and those grades are the first place they're going to look.
I also wanted to emphasize what Camille was saying about the student treated test preparation like a part-time job. I think oftentimes when we're working with students, we hear a lot of, yeah, I'm just going to try harder next time. And really making sure, especially UT Austin is now test required. So making sure that those test scores don't create ambiguity for the application reader. You don't want strong grades, strong AP scores, and then not a strong test score. That creates a question. And I always tell my students, we want to make sure there are no questions left unanswered. And so making sure that their test scores and your grades are aligned is really important. And if that means making test preparation your part-time job during the summer, then that's what needs to happen.
think the other thing I get asked a lot by parents is, what if my student can't handle 5 AP courses? We want students to take the level of rigor the student can handle that tells the story the student is trying to tell. So if English is a super duper challenge, maybe that's the place the kid gets a break. And if the story is in engineering, English is not a heavy duty look, anyways. So I don't know. I hope that helps and doesn't confuse things. But I feel really strongly that it's a combo of healthy rigor and interest.
All right, let's go turn the page a little bit. Thank you, Camille. Back to activities, because we do know that activities are a huge part, as all of you have said. You can't run from your grades, but this is a place where you can also really have a huge impact. So, Allison, you want to talk to us a little bit here?
And as I kind of in the examples that I shared before, right? Similar here. Successful admits, right, have at least 3 to 4 core areas of that major fit to major activities, right? But that doesn't mean that's it, right? And for those highly selective majors, right? We're talking about engineering, we're talking about computer science, right? Architecture, right? Those are ones where we want to, yes, it is absolutely a-okay if a student doesn't know what they want to do, right? But I always ask my students, is there a universe, a part of you that might be interested in engineering or might be interested in architecture? Let's test it early so we've got the runway to build it, right? And if we test it and you don't like it, we've lost nothing, right? Because you're still exploring. And now you've got a nice little pivot to talk about, right? But for the selective majors, we do need a little bit of runway in order for you to develop not just experience, but some of those core skills that are gonna, like Molly said, contribute to your ability to be successful on that first day of your first choice major, right? And so now I will say that, over time, especially over the past, 5 or 6 years that I've been doing this, there are a few things that have evolved a little bit in terms of UT admissions, right? We're definitely seeing that the connection between those activities, right, especially this admission season, needed to be really strong. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, I just happened to do this activity that related to business, and I happened to do this other activity that was kind of related to business, and then I kind of took this class, right? It was more of a connection between, I took this class, I discovered this interest, I did an informational interview of this particular human because of the thing I studied in this class, and then I shadowed them. And that shadowing opportunity actually connected me with someone who I then did a week-long internship with. So we see the link, and it's almost like a stair-stepping of this activity led to this one, led to this one, led to this one. And in each one, you're bringing everything that you learned, like that you came with before, applying the thing you learned in the step before, and then taking it forward, right? And then reflecting, and then stepping forward again. And so I would say that's something that I've really noticed. And of course, that if woven in here is contribution of a student's unique gifts and talents, right? I always tell students, I have a student who is just a whiz with spreadsheets, right? Doesn't really want to be in business, but she's really good at spreadsheets, right? And so this was a student that helped organize the Model UN conference. They're not even in Model UN. They just are really good with the spreadsheets that the person who was running it needed, right? So this is just like, you have a superpower, right? And was able to make a contribution. So when the activities that are that fit to major are also weaving in, like that student with the drone, right? Like I couldn't have done that. That wouldn't have been my gift. right? But that student just had that skill and applied it in an area, right? And so if those unique gifts and talents are woven in, and then there's a commitment to the common good. And I always tell students, common good can absolutely be traditional philanthropy, but it's broader than that, right? If it's the cheerleader that really wished that when she was a freshman, she had had more support in preparing for tryouts and went back to the middle school and just gave some lessons to the kids who were going to try out, right? It's that kind of, I always ask my students too, to think about if you're involved in an activity, ask yourself, what is something you wish somebody would do something about? And then what if that person was you? Because if you ask a kid, if you ask any adult, what should someone else do something about? You get a long list, right? And then say, but what if you were that person? The student that was like, I don't know why more people don't get involved in student government. That's why everybody hates the dances. And then went and found out why, right? That's all, right? And so that common good does not necessarily, can be traditional philanthropy, absolutely, right? Traditional service, but it also can be, I'm a part of this particular team or group or community or class, and there's a need that I see that I actually want to address, right? It could be a study group. It could be, like I had a student who really loves making color-coded like planners, and just like went to a freshman advisory and said, hey, do you want to know how to color code your planner so you can see all your homework? Right? That's the kind of stuff we're talking about here. Anything to add, Molly, Camille?
Just that, once again, this is just allowing students to be curious and then giving them the space to act on it. So if, just make space to have those conversations with your kid, and they have ideas. And sometimes they just need somebody to say, that's cool, you should do that, and tell me how it goes. And those types of permissions are sometimes just what the student needs in order to kind of take that, that next step in their curiosity.
And we call it, when we work with our students, we call it experiments. Right. No pressure, right? You go to the freshman advisory and no one talks to you. Cool. You take your colored pencils and you go back, right? And so it absolutely, it's that freedom to explore and not need it to turn into something. Right. And so reducing the pressure, exploring is enough. Exploring and reflecting. And for parents, keep a list, document it, right? Like just keep notes somewhere so that if it does end up turning into something, because this all can be pretty random, then you've got notes about the story, right? And so, but what we're talking about here is that clear progression of initiative and impact. Initiative can be one idea. Impact can be one person. It can be bigger, right? But ultimately it builds on itself. And so the skill and the curiosity and the connections build on themselves so that impact increases over time. The skill development increases over time. And the student's own ability to reflect on that also in the analytical critical thinking increases over time. You can see in this little snippet of this resume that student started out, doing just exploring. Maybe I'm interested in finance. I don't know. And so did a summer program, the High School Investor Challenge at TCU, and really enjoyed it. And so found a way, again, what did they walk away from? They were curious about how does this look in other parts of my life? Like, the student was like, I don't think I'm going to like be a hedge fund operator. Like I'm probably not going to be a stock trader, but I am really interested in how numbers help. And so decided to just shadow a member of the accounting department. It was at one of his family members' workplaces, right? And wanted to see, like, what software did they use? And again, just discovered a profit and loss statement, and then knew what that was, right? Ultimately, then had a long summer ahead, right? His parents were like, "You should find a job," and he had a lot going on. And so he was like, I'm not going to be able to find a job that's going to let me do all the things that I need to go and do, right? I've got this practice here. I'm going to camp for a couple of weeks. And so literally just decided, well, I wonder what would happen if I just offered to clean all of my neighbors' trash cans, because summer is really hot and those trash cans are funky, right? And so it just turned into, once it started, more neighbors recommended and more neighbors. And then he just kind of built, and it was little, right? It was him and a hose and his parents' water, right? But ultimately, he was able to then apply. Wait, I know how to make that profit and loss statement. So I'm just going to play with that with this own business, with my own business. What happens when I post on Nextdoor? What does the profit and loss statement look like once I do that? Does it change? Right. And that is exactly how that built out. But it was a bunch of little steps and just applying those skills, right? Knowing it didn't have to be huge, right? But sticking with it, like Lisa said, just kind of taking it through. Didn't set a goal to make $10,000 washing trash cans. Just thought like, I wonder if I can make my gas money so I can go to Barton Springs, right? Like, let's start there, right? And so kind of starting where they are and then reflecting on it, adding to it. Anything to add, y'all?
Just wanted to jump in. We may have gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves since we have some new people who are not, on our season pass with our webinars.
Yes, exactly.
Expanded resume. What is that?
Thank you. Yes.
Everyone is really familiar, with the activities on the Common App and, kind of your typical one-page job resume. This is not that. So UT Austin asked for an expanded resume. This can be in a 3 to 5 page document. You can see here in this example, it not only includes what the student did, it also includes what they learned, how they grew, how it relates to their future goals. It's very expansive on what you put in the bullet points. So you can see this one summer activity of creating the trash can business, turns into 7 bullet points. And so when we say expanded resume, this should really be an exercise in reflection. This is your opportunity to demonstrate how how you kind of built that story. So your expanded resume can also expand on that story arc of, I took this class, I did this thing, and then I did this thing. And so really, kind of lean into that and use all of that real estate that they give you. 3 to 5 pages is just, a blessing in disguise. So make sure that you use that real estate and just, like, again, it doesn't have to be just kind of that one page quick overview that we typically see of some colleges.
This is a place, thanks, Molly. This is a place where parents can really help, right? Just keeping track on a piece of paper, on a spreadsheet, on a whatever, on a doc of like, this is what happened. And then also we always ask our students, what knowledge in every activity, what knowledge and or skills did you gain? What surprised you about it? Right? And what was something you contributed? If as a parent, you just track that with, write that down for your student when they start high school, by the time they get to this expanded resume, it won't be so overwhelming. That's what we do with our students. From the moment we meet them, we start documenting those kinds of things about their activities so that when it is time to format that resume, we don't have to remember it all.
And this is really unique to UT Austin.
Yes.
So like Molly says, this is a secret little gem you have that you really want to attend to from the beginning, because it's a sweet addition that you need. It's expected for sure. Camille, do you want to talk to us just a little bit about some common pitfalls?
I think again, like this really just goes back to being mindful and being forward thinking about all the things that you do, including what you put on your college application. So one of the big things with the way the UT application reads is you get to put more than one major. You put your first choice major and then your second choice. And being tactical about that is very important, because all of it should align with your activities, with your 4-year high school course plan, with the things that you show interest in. So sometimes I'll start with a student and they'll say something to me like, "Hey, Camille, I think I'm going to apply liberal arts because it's easy to get into, easier than Cockrell." Well, nothing is easy, one, but two, if your entire 4-year high school plan has been aligned with engineering and STEM, you can't toss in liberal arts. And there were students doing that quite a bit. Like, I heard it's easier if I apply this way, but then the story doesn't read that way. So they know that it's just a student trying to just simply get in to then transfer. So that's one big pitfall. Another is the second choice major not aligning with the first. So if the first choice major is business, the second choice major needs to be something like that, whether it's liberal arts or it's in Moody or whatever it is, it should be similar to the story you've told. The best example I can think of is I had a student I was talking to that was applying business. That's the first choice major. And his second interest was environmental science. And I was like, buddy, as much as I love that for you, like, that is not what your story tells. So you cannot put your first choice business and your second choice be environmental science, or your resume, your supplementals, your courses that you've selected do not match. And it's very important. That evidence of preparation and depth is very key. And the other thing that is just kind of it happens a lot, just at the very end, junior spring or in the summer, a kid deciding to just completely jump ship from what they've been doing and switching. And as much as I hate to tell a kid, like, you cannot pivot this late, you cannot pivot that late. It is what it is. There are some schools in which you can. UT's not one of them. Like, you really do have to show the 4 years of depth. And the last piece, I think personally, Allison and Molly might disagree, but the last piece is the biggest pitfall kids fall into. And it's one of the most important. Remember, we've talked about how with UT, it really is a holistic thing, especially if you're not inside the top 5%. And they do admit a lot of students outside of the top 5%. And the ones that get in are the ones that have an extremely aligned story. So the high school transcript, the expanded resume, the essay and supplemental writings, and the choice in who you've selected to write letters of rec should tell your story. I saw someone write earlier in the evening, asked about letters of recommendation, and UT wants outside recs, not teachers. So being mindful about who you choose to write that. Can that person speak to what you want to study? Not, does this person have a lot of power, or can this person help me in a certain way? Can they speak to what you want to do with your life at UT? And that's really the key. I think also with essays, an important thing to remember is, I've seen some questions come in about, are we able to write about health circumstances? Are we able to explain bumps in the road? The beauty of the college application is there is a place called in the Common App that it attests to additional information. And that's the place that you can share those things. And yes, they're important. And yes, they're a really valuable key to your child's story. And you should include those things. And so those are my thoughts. Somebody asked for examples. So if you worked and you have them and you're a student that like, I cannot be a kid who does a summer program. I can't afford that. And so instead you're working in the summer. That's every bit as valuable. Can your manager at your job write about your work ethic and your style? So that's one kind of outside recommendation. The other is if you are lucky enough to be able to have an internship or attend a summer program that aligns with your major, asking someone at that to speak to you, to speak about you, and connecting with that person before you walk away from that opportunity you had with them, to then be one of your recommenders on your UT application.
Great. Thank you so much, Camille.
Of course.
And Molly, will you talk to us just briefly here about what we should prioritize as you guys have given these families so much great information. What are the final things here that you would recommend for people to prioritize?
Yeah, so I mean, you see here kind of the 8th grade through 11th grade. So just kind of high, high level here. 8th and 9th grade, allow your student to explore. Especially in 8th grade, start having conversations about different jobs. I can, give an example in my own life. Just as you're at restaurants, at events, doing things as a family, point out different careers, expand what they know beyond doctor, lawyer, engineer, the 5 careers that most students, can name. So allow them to explore. In 9th grade, give them the space to adjust to high school academics so that they can really lean into the rigor of high school, give them that space, but continue to allow them to explore. Use, if they have classes that they can take to explore different areas, see if they can take one in the fall and one in the spring, just to get, a little bit of exposure. And then in between that 9th and 10th grade, we're usually working with students and it's normal for them to have still 3 to 5 interests. Pick one. Let's see. Let's use the summer to confirm or eliminate, because elimination is just as important as confirming. Because then you can move into the 10th grade and you can, before you go into that 10th grade year, really start to ask, how can I go further? What can I do a little bit more this year? Is there something I can take on? Even if, like Allison's student, even if you don't get elected, how can I still lean in? How can I do a little bit more? And be intentional about that so that you can help them explore with curiosity around what could that look like. And then, between 10th and 11th grade, again, you've confirmed, we've moving deeper. So can we do some more activities that are show initiative and impact? So we're starting to move out of that interest and involvement and into that initiative and impact. And then, in 11th grade, it should really be solidified and just starting to explore independent projects, things that are, again, like what Allison was saying, that curiosity and following that through and asking why and seeing, could I be that person? So really, again, giving students space to explore and then helping them really refine their ideas.
Fantastic. And I think pretty much you ran through this. Is there anything you want to add here, Molly?
No, just, again, a lot of the things that we do with our students is helping them discover what their talents are, what their strengths and their aptitudes. And that's a really good place to start. Things that are hobbies and just are of interest can oftentimes, grow into, larger things. Sometimes they stay just as hobbies and interests. But, really helping identify and help point out what do you see as your child's strength? And because sometimes they don't even recognize it. And so that can really help kind of guide a more personalized plan.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We are so thrilled that you guys were with us tonight. We appreciate your time and all the wonderful questions. Thank you to our fantastic panelists who shared their experience and their knowledge with you tonight. We hope that this has been helpful for you. It's certainly a topic that we're very passionate about. And we're so glad that you joined us this evening. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Thanks. Bye-bye.